Most people read the parable of the talents and walk away thinking it's about using your gifts for God, maybe serving at church, maybe being bolder in your faith, and it is about that. But here's what almost nobody catches. Jesus described a master who left 3 servants different amounts of money. He came back and evaluated them on what they did with what they were given. The servant who buried his money kept it safe, didn't lose a dime, got rebuked. And the master's final words to him cut like a blade. You should have at least put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. That is Jesus Christ, the Son of God, teaching the concept of return on investment, not metaphorically, not as some distant spiritual symbol. He used the actual mechanics of first-century banking, compound growth, and productive deployment of capital to make a spiritual point. Which means that for Jesus, how money moves, how it's put to work, multiplied, stewarded, was never a secular subject. It was always a sacred one. So here is the question I want to sit with you on today. What if Jesus wasn't just teaching about eternal things through financial illustrations? What if he was actually trying to teach his followers how money works at the same time? Because when you read the Gospels slowly, something remarkable starts to emerge. Jesus talked about money more than almost any other subject, more than heaven, more than hell, more than prayer. And embedded in those teachings is a complete, coherent philosophy of what we today call cash flow money coming in, money going out, money working, money multiplying, and money either serving you or enslaving you. Most of us have read right past it. Let's go back and look at it together. I want to speak directly to someone for a moment. Maybe you've been a faithful Christian your entire life. You've tithed, you've given generously, you've prayed over your finances, and yet, month after month, it feels like there's more month left than money. The bills don't stop. The anxiety doesn't lift. And somewhere in the back of your mind is this quiet, painful question you've never said out loud. If I'm honoring God with my money, why does it still feel this hard? I want you to know that question is not a lack of faith. That question is wisdom knocking at the door. Because what I've come to believe, after spending years studying what the Bible actually says about money, is that many Christians have been taught the giving side of biblical finance without the stewardship side. We've been taught to open our hands, but not always how to wisely manage what flows through them first. Jesus addressed both, and today we're going to look at the side that doesn't get nearly enough attention in the pews. Let's lay the foundation before we build anything on it. Psalm 2:4:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." That one verse reframes everything. Every dollar you've ever earned didn't originate with you, it passed through you. You are not an owner, you are a manager, a steward. Someone entrusted with resources that belong to someone else. Now here's why that matters for cash flow. A manager's job is not simply to hold what they've been given. Their job is to deploy it wisely so that it produces fruit that honors the owner. This is the through line of nearly every financial parable Jesus ever told. The question was never just, do you have money? The question was always, what are you doing with it? Jesus understood something the financial world didn't formalize for another 2,000 years. Wealth isn't really about what you accumulate, it's about how resources move. Let's talk about the most basic law of cash flow, the one every financial advisor will tell you on day one, and the one that Proverbs had already been teaching for 3,000 years. Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down." In modern terms, spend less than you earn. Keep a margin. Don't consume everything that comes in. Solomon didn't write that verse for rich people. He wrote it for everyone. Because the principle is not about the size of the income, it's about the relationship between what comes in and what goes out. That gap, that margin, that space between earning and spending, that is where financial freedom is born. In the ancient world, olive oil wasn't just food. It was currency, it was fuel, it was medicine, it was wealth in liquid form. When Solomon said the wise store up olive oil, he was describing someone who understood that today's surplus is tomorrow's security and tomorrow's opportunity. Here's the tragic pattern I see in so many sincere Christian homes. Income rises over time, but lifestyle rises with it. A raise comes in, and within 6 months, the raise is spent, not on anything wicked. On bigger cars, nicer dinners, subscriptions, upgrades. Things that feel like rewards, but are actually just expanded outflows. The margin stays at zero. And a margin of zero means there is no room for generosity, no room for investment, no room for the unexpected, and no room for God to redirect your resources. Building a margin isn't about hoarding. It's about being ready, ready to give, ready to invest, ready to survive a storm. The margin is sacred because it's what gives you options, and options are how a faithful steward remains flexible in the hand of God. Nobody in the Bible demonstrates this principle more dramatically than Joseph. You know the story. Dreams, betrayal, slavery, prison, and then by the grace of God, the second most powerful position in the most powerful nation on earth. Pharaoh has 2 dreams he can't interpret, and Joseph explains them. 7 years of extraordinary abundance are coming, followed by 7 years of severe famine. And then Joseph does something that every financial planner should study. He doesn't just announce the problem, he proposes a system. Genesis 41:3-4-6. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine. 20% of income saved systematically during the good years to survive the lean ones. That is a cash flow plan. That is a budget. That is a savings rate built into the structure of governance itself. And it saved not just Egypt, it saved the entire known world, including Joseph's own family, including the very lineage through which Jesus Christ would eventually be born. The principle Joseph implemented wasn't complicated, but it required discipline during the good years when everyone else was eating, celebrating, and consuming without thought. The wisdom wasn't in the idea. The wisdom was in the execution when it wasn't urgent. Your financial season right now, whatever it is, will not last forever. The question is, are you building a system for the next season while you're still in this one? Now let's talk about one of the most quietly devastating forces in Christian financial life today. Proverbs 22:7 is as blunt as the Bible ever gets about money. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Slave. That's not a metaphor for mild inconvenience. In the ancient world, Solomon's audience understood slavery with devastating clarity, and he chose that word intentionally. Here's the cash flow picture. When you earn money and it flows to you, you have stewardship over it. You can save it, give it, invest it, deploy it, however God leads. But when you owe money, when you carry high-interest debt, a portion of everything you earn is already spoken for before it arrives. It leaves your hands before you can decide what to do with it. The lender's claim comes first. Your freedom comes second. This is reversed cash flow. And the cruel mathematics of high-interest debt is that the faster you try to spend your way into happiness, the longer you work for someone else's wealth rather than your own family's future. Paul wrote to the Romans, "Let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another." That wasn't a casual suggestion. It was a description of the kind of financial posture that keeps a believer free to give, free to respond to need, free to follow unexpected calling without being anchored to a payment structure built on yesterday's desires. I want to be honest with you here, not all debt is identical. A mortgage on a modest, reasonably priced home that builds equity is not the same as carrying a balance on 4 credit cards at 24% interest. Wisdom draws those distinctions. But the direction Proverbs is pointing is clear. The goal of a faithful steward is not to become comfortable with debt, it's to move systematically toward freedom from it. Because freedom from debt is freedom in stewardship. Jesus told a story that most people read as a story about grace. And it is. It's one of the most beautiful pictures of the Father's love in all of literature, but there's also a financial autopsy buried inside it. The younger son in Luke 15 demanded his inheritance early, a shocking request in that culture, essentially wishing his father dead. The father granted it. And what did the son do? He squandered his wealth in wild living. He had a significant inflow in inheritance, and he maximized his outflow until the inflow was gone. And the moment the money ran out, the narrative says simply, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. No savings, no reserve, no plan for the lean season. When the external environment turned against him, he had no margin left to absorb it. He ended up feeding pigs, longing to eat what the pigs were eating. But notice something. The moment he came to his senses, that exact phrase, the first thing he did, was assess his situation clearly and make a plan. He didn't just feel bad. He calculated, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father. Even in his repentance, there was a strategy. He identified the resource, he identified the gap, and he charted a path from one to the other. That's not an accident in Jesus' storytelling. Coming to your senses financially means facing the numbers clearly without shame and making a plan to move toward health. The father was waiting on the road, but the son had to start walking. We come back now to the parable that opened this whole conversation. The parable of the talents in Matthew 25. 3 servants, different amounts, same expectation, do something faithful with what you've been given. The 2 servants who doubled their money didn't do it by sitting on it. They deployed it. They put it to work. The original Greek word used for what they did, they traded with it, they put it to use. And when the master returned, the commendation was identical for both, regardless of the different amounts. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, I will put you in charge of many things. What condemned the third servant was not that he lost money, it was that he made no attempt at all. He didn't put the money to work. He didn't even pursue the lowest risk option, the banking deposit Jesus specifically mentioned. He buried it, preserved it, protected himself from any risk of loss, and it cost him everything. Now I want to handle this carefully, because this is where people sometimes hear something the parable is not saying. This is not a mandate to take reckless financial risks in the name of faith. The servant who buried the talent wasn't cautious, he was paralyzed by fear. His own words revealed it. I was afraid. Fear is not wisdom. Fear disguised as caution is just buried potential. The wise application is this. Money kept entirely idle sitting under a mattress, sitting in accounts earning nothing while inflation quietly erodes its value, is not neutral stewardship. The resources God has entrusted to you were meant to be productive. Whether that means eliminating high-interest debt, which gives you an immediate guaranteed return, building an emergency fund that provides margin, contributing to a retirement account that compounds over time, or eventually investing in productive assets, the direction is always toward deployment, not paralysis. Ecclesiastes 11:2 says, invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8, you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. That's Solomon advocating for diversification centuries before modern portfolio theory had a name. Here is the deeper thing underneath all of this, and I don't want to rush past it. The reason Jesus talked about money so much wasn't because he cared most about money. It was because he knew what money reveals. In Matthew 6:221, he said, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Not the other way around. He didn't say your heart goes first and your treasure follows. He said where you put your money is where your heart will end up. The direction runs from resource to affection, which means your budget is not just a financial document. It's a map of what you actually value. This is why stewardship is a spiritual discipline, not just a financial one. Managing cash flow well, building a margin, eliminating debt, saving wisely, deploying resources productively, giving generously is a form of worship. It is the material expression of the belief that God owns it all, that you are a manager rather than an owner, and that faithful management is a way of honoring the one who entrusted it to you in the first place. And here is the quiet miracle that faithful stewards discover over time. When you manage well, generosity becomes possible in ways it never was before. Not because you've become wealthy though, sometimes that happens, but because margin creates the ability to respond to the friend who lost a job, to the mission that needs funding, to the need that appears on a Tuesday afternoon when you weren't expecting it. Generosity requires capacity. Building that capacity is not greed, it's preparation for greater faithfulness. So let's make this concrete. Here are 3 things you can do this week that are completely rooted in what we've walked through today. First, know your actual cash flow, not approximately. Exactly. Write down what comes in each month and what goes out. If those 2 numbers are the same, or if outflow exceeds income, that is the number 1 thing to address, not the investment account, not the retirement strategy. The basic margin between earning and spending, build that first. Second, name the debt and make a plan. List every debt you carry. Write the balance, the interest rate, and the minimum payment. Then, and this is important, decide you are going to move toward freedom from it, systematically and deliberately. Whether you use the avalanche method, highest interest first, or the snowball method, smallest balance first, pick one and start moving. Not someday, this month. Third, decide what faithful deployment looks like for you right now. Maybe it's funding a starter emergency fund of $1,000 before you do anything else. Maybe it's increasing your retirement contribution by 1 percentage point. Maybe it's talking to a fee-only financial advisor who shares your values. Whatever the next faithful step is, make it specific and make it scheduled. The master in the parable came back. He always comes back. And when he does, the question will not be how much you were given. The question will be what you did with it. I want to leave you with something that I hope you'll carry far beyond today. Biblical financial wisdom is not about getting rich. It is not about proving your faith through your net worth. It is not about a formula that guarantees prosperity if you just give enough or pray enough or believe hard enough. It's about something far more lasting than any of that. It's about becoming the kind of person, the kind of steward who can be trusted with more because they've been faithful with what they have. It's about living with freedom rather than anxiety, generosity rather than scarcity, clarity rather than confusion, and the deep, quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are managing well what God has entrusted to you. Jesus looked to the financial world of his day, the farmers, the merchants, the servants, the debtors, the investors, and he used every one of them to teach something true and eternal about how we are meant to live. Cash flow wasn't beneath him. Savings wasn't beneath him. Return on investment wasn't beneath him, because nothing that touches human life is beneath his teaching. Somewhere in Israel 2,000 years ago, a servant buried his master's money in the ground and called it safety. He handed it back exactly as he received it and expected gratitude. He didn't receive gratitude. God has given you something today: time, income, capacity, margin, or perhaps just this conversation. He is not asking you to take reckless chances. He is asking you to be faithful, to think clearly, to plan wisely, to move toward freedom, and to hold everything you manage with an open hand, remembering whose it really is. The master hasn't returned yet, but he will. And when he does, let the answer to his question be the one we all long to hear: "Well done, good and faithful servant." Not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. Go manage well.